Which brings us to two notable comedians and two friends of Gilbert's. And Gilbert, you might have to do the driving on this one. Let's start with the late, great Norm.
Yeah, I remember doing Norm's podcast. And, as always, it turned with any of my comic friends who would turn like deranged.
Mm-hmm.
And he was very funny with that. He'd always talk with like a sneer, it's like, and I remember right after, I put that photo up a few times. It's one of my favorite photos. Afterwards, after doing Norm's show, Norm and I joined Jeff Ross and, of course, Bob Saget.
Yeah.
And I remember that being a night of just nonstop laughs.
You could tell even from the still photo
Yeah.
that you guys were ripping it up.
Yeah, it was just so much fun.
Truly original. I never met him. It's funny. I'm in comedy a long time, and I know a million comedians, and I've gotten to work with a million comedians, and for some reason our paths never crossed. And we wanted to get him on this show, Gil, as you know.
Yes.
And he was Norm. So he was strangely strangely hard to pin down, or non-committal, or could do it and then couldn't do it. And
I can't. I don't really know. I know I'm working.
One of the truly great comic minds, though, and that his last appearance on Letterman, where he got so emotional, and in ways it sounds corny. I felt I knew him through his work, and obviously a lot of mutual friends. That Letterman appearance, really.
Gil, your appearance on his podcast, that whole podcast was so good. It was, and so funny.
Yeah, let's not diminish that, Gilbert. It made history, your appearance, and also the Einstein episode.
Yeah.
With Norm.
Yeah, I remember when I was on Norm's podcast. Afterwards, I just felt like I ran a marathon. It was just got crazier and crazier.
Netflix owns that show now, and they're not available to the public, unfortunately, and they're sitting on them. Hopefully one day it would be great if that podcast was re-released, because
there's that Bob Einstein episode is also legend.
Yep.
What can you say about the guy? I mean, a really rare, truly original comic voice.
Really,
and I love
such
Kurt
a
Ferguson
loss.
more than life itself.
He, by the way, Norm's book, based on a true story, not a memoir, which is so funny. The audio book, he narrates it. So if you miss Norm and you've never heard him reading his book, it's brilliant.
Now I got to get it. Yeah, I regret never meeting the man. And Gilbert, I'm glad you had such wonderful times with him.
Yes, he was a lot of fun.
It's a big loss. It's a loss for this
podcast,
podcast,
a total smartass.
Yeah, I wish our paths had crossed.
You say there's no way we could go back, and that I've broken what we had. I wish that it would come around. No.
So let's move on to Bob. Last but not least, which was a blow and not expected. And I will say that I had just reached out to Bob. We just recorded our 400th episode a couple of days ago, Gilbert and I reached out to Bob and I said, will you come and do this with us? And he said, I think I'm on a plane that night. And we were going back and forth and trying to arrange something. And then I sent him the link, which has been shared online. I sent him the link to Don Rickles' estate auction. Did you see that?
Oh, yeah.
They
I bid on a couple things.
You bid on a couple of things?
And I got none of them.
Bob's face was on a couple of items that, like there was pictures of them together and a poster or something. And I said, hey, you might want to bid on some of these things. And he wrote me back and he said, this just makes me sad, actually. And he said, but life goes on. And I had said to my wife, I have to call Bob. I have to text Bob. We have to we moved the date of the 400th episode, and I got a phone call from my sister-in-law probably 20 minutes later telling me she just heard that he was gone. It was very shocking, and still is.
And
So
I had just spoken to Bob like a few days before he died. And we were on the phone, and as always, the minute anything turned at all sincere or serious, we turn it to just complete filth and make it reverse, and it was always fun. And it was like, I always remember, like, when the Aristocrats came out, people were saying, can you believe Bob Saget talks like that? And to people who knew him, they say, we couldn't believe he could speak any other way.
It wasn't Danny Tanner.
No.
I didn't know him that well. I certainly didn't know him as well as Gilbert, but but that was part of him. But there was such a gentleness to the guy.
Yes.
Too. I mean, his humor was so edgy and so dark and so it could be so scatological, as you'll hear because we're rerunning the second episode that we did with him. But he didn't want to injure. He didn't want to hurt anybody. He was very, very, very sensitive guy. Did he always tell you that he loved you before he hung up the phone, Gilbert?
Yes.
As
Yeah.
Dara shared with me, there was a real kindness to him that you couldn't miss.
And I remember I got a call from Jeff Ross who said, oh, sad news, Bob Saget died. And I swear, I thought, oh, this is going to be a funny, sick joke. And I said, oh, okay. And I was waiting for the punchline. And then he said, no, seriously, he died. And I still have a hard time grasping that.
It's a gut punch. It really is. Gilbert you made the rounds. You went on CNN. You went on television. You said some lovely things about him. But 65. I mean, it's too young. It's too big a loss for.
And it seemed like he was
so many
another
people.
one starting out again. Like he did a live show.
Yeah.
And he was really excited to be getting back to live performing. And
Going back to the second podcast with him, and he started that podcast, Bob Saget's Here For You, and it did seem like he was entering another phase of his career and another phase of his life. It seemed like he was more wistful and trying more to be of service. I mean, that's why he was pleasant to be around. There really was no show business at all to the guy.
yeah.
And he struck me, again, didn't know him well, but he struck me as also having a sadness about him. Do you think that, Gil, did you feel that?
Yeah.
A depth and a sadness about him.
And he also, he had two sisters who died.
Yeah, that's right.
One from scleroderma, which was a charity he did loads of work for.
Yes, to his credit.
And see, there's another thing that shows that what I've always said about comedy and tragedy. He made, I remember being with him a few times where he made jokes about his sister. Really deranged stuff. But then you see, I mean, he loved his sister.
Of course.
And his family was totally traumatized by it. But he could just be completely sick. I think if you could communicate with the dead and get in touch with Bob Saget, he would make completely bad taste jokes about his own death. He was that kind. He would just really
staying true to his art to the end.
Yes.
To the bitter end. It's a big loss for us personally, for Gilbert and Jeff and Stamos and obviously a lot of his friends and fans.
And I put up a photo too. I was on the beach with Jeff, and we're holding up a phone, and on the phone is Bob Saget, because we're sitting on the beach and said, "Hey, let's call Bob."
Yeah, I saw the picture.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not much else we can add. Rest in peace, Bob.